Something I went through something very interesting this last week actually, and it was a painful experience. But through that experience, I learned something called triangulation. When I'm going through a really high stress moment, and I'm trying to understand what's happening and to try to walk through it versus just trying to bury it and ignore it, which is not the best thing to do. And so I tell AI, I'm a mental health coach. You have to give prompts to AI so that AI knows how to give you the answers that you need. And so I described the whole situation that I went through. And then I said, hey, I'm a mental health coach. And I said, please give me a professional answer. And it came back and it told me about triangulation. And I never heard that term before. And so triangulation happens when person A talks to person B about person C. And then person B tells person C what person A said about person C. And so when you work with family dynamics, especially, you realize that this is something every single family goes through. And families are dysfunctional when you have triangulation inside of what's going on in the family dynamic. And this specific story is about David. King David didn't practice triangulation, but he did live out triangulation because he never dealt with directly the problems that he needed to work with. When you see Job with Absalom, because Absalom wanted to see his father, but there was never a direct contact with David and Absalom. So Job took the responsibility to go to David, but he had to build a whole context and story and have a theater practically played out to get the message across so that David would accept Absalom back into the community. Even more interesting dynamic because you see that David was in a very highly dysfunctional family. His family was practically destroyed. And it goes back to another very interesting story where his son Amon had a desire to have a relationship with his half sister, and David never addressed the issue. He buried it. So Absalom, and this is where triangulation happened, Absalom took upon him the responsibility to bring justice. And so Absalom killed his brother, and he ran from his father and spent time away from his father. And so he came back. And then when he came back, he did not see his father's face for almost 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. And so Absalom took action in his own hand and he burnt Job's field to get Job's attention. And when he got Job's attention, then Job went and tried to mitigate or tried to bring the relationship back into restoration. But the whole point is Absalom then took a step forward and he won the people's heart and he took the initiative to take over his father's reign because he felt like his father wasn't doing his job. Pushing David out, and then David had to flee, and then you see a chain reaction of many terrible things that happen. But then the final point where I want to take it is when Job killed Absalom against David's strict orders, but David's actions, a reaction of pain and grief because of what happened to his son, Job rebuked David, saying, this is not your public service and correct response because it affects the people that you are leading. And then David snapped out of it. So if we take that story and we understand that triangulation is the number one devastating thing that can happen to families because people can't be direct and to deal with issues and problems with the person that needs to be dealt with. and it develops and it creates a toxic environment where things can never be resolved because people can't be real with themselves and they can't be real with others around them. We need people that can help us. I can only control that which is inside of me. I can only take ownership of what is happening in my own domain, in my own arc. And if I can't take control of what's going on inside of my own arc, I need to then determine that what's outside of my arc is no longer under my control. And so anything that's under me, I have ownership of and I need to address and deal with. David had ownership of his family, but he did not take ownership because he did not directly address situations that needed to be addressed. And so then things get out of control because things that, and David probably had pain and trauma that happened in his own life that he could never address. So it carried over into his own personal stuff that he then buried his head in the sand, so to speak, and to decide not to confront certain issues because of his own past pain and own past trauma and his own past experiences. So no matter what we've been through, no matter what we're going through, God's purposes still ultimately trump everything. But that does not deny the existence of what we're going through. And we cannot live in self denial because if we continue to live in self denial, it will eventually catch up to us because it's going to destroy us, just like David. So, the dysfunctionality, if we're living in a dysfunctional family, we need to quickly identify where triangulation is happening and we need to figure out how to isolate that so that it does not continue. And if people continue triangulation, it's a form of gossip which projects false images and issues that can never be dealt with, therefore creating an environment of toxicity, therefore creating an explosive environment that's dangerous, destructive, and it does not allow for healing to happen. And so when we're destroyed, when we're devastated, when we are completely crushed and we want to find healing, we can't find healing in that environment. So therefore we have to isolate ourselves 100% and to get into an environment of people that can help us begin the process of healing. So it takes me back to Moses' issue with the snakes that bit the people of Israel, which caused all that pain. And the direction that God gave Moses was to erect a snake, a bronze, not a real snake, but a bronze, and whoever looked on it was healed. So our pain and our that which hurts us can also be the same thing that can heal us. But if that which is going to heal us is a toxic environment, it won't heal us. So church can hurt us, but also church can be our healing. Community can hurt us, but community can also be where our healing is. People can hurt us, but people also heal us. So we can't find healing in a church that's toxic. We can't find healing in a community that's destroyed. We can't find healing in people that are depleted and do not have healthy boundaries.